So I'd now like to welcome Andy to the stage. As I said to you, Andy is somebody who probably needs no introduction to those of you who are using his products and services. But if you don't know of it, Amazon Web Services has really become the de facto platform that's defined the cloud computing world. So I couldn't be more excited to have him here. Last time I saw him, he was standing in front of an audience of no less than 6,000 developers at the reInvent conference. And that shows you something of the momentum he's built. I not only have, as you know, I'm a big evangelist of cloud itself, and you should have in your chair actually a sticker, which is the Future of Cloud Computing survey, endorsed not only by Amazon, but now by over 50 collaborators. It's by far and away the widest survey in the industry. So we have everybody from Amazon to Microsoft to the smaller players like Eucalyptus. Many of you in the audience are collaborating on it. But this will be the third year where we'll be collating the results of this phenomenal change. But it was led by Amazon. And Andy, welcome to the stage, and please join us to tell us a little bit about your story and the Amazon piece. Great to have you here.
Tuck those there. Well, thank you, Michael. And that was actually really an interesting presentation. I enjoyed it. And as Michael said, he and I spent some time together just after some of the keynotes at reInvent, which was our first attempt at a big developer conference last November in Las Vegas. And it was just super interesting conversation. And I can tell from just watching the presentation that seems like an awesome course. I would like to take that course. So thanks for the wrap up. I'll try to be as quick as I can in the overview so that we can get to the conversation that Michael's sponsoring about culture and about hatching a startup inside a company. But I'll start by saying that AWS at this point has been in business. We started working on AWS 10 years ago. It's when we wrote the original business plan in September of 2003. And then we had to define the services and build the teams and then build the products. And we started launching the services into market in March of 2006, so just over 7 years ago. And we think about our platform as being 7 years young because we have so much more we're providing for our customers. We've delivered a lot this year, which I'll talk about in a second, but we have so much more coming, not just this year, but also in future years. But that said, if you look at the technology infrastructure platform that we've built in AWS over the last 7 years, it is night and day different today than it was 7 years ago. And it's really a very robust, fully functional infrastructure technology platform. And this is a very high level look at this, but we have a number of compute services. We have something called Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2. We have a Hadoop implementation on top of EC2, which we call Elastic MapReduce for big data analytics and parallel processing. We have a load balancing service. We have a number of storage services. We have a large object store called Amazon Simple Storage Service, or S3. And we have persistent storage or block storage called the Elastic Block Store. And we have a very inexpensive, very scalable, highly durable backup and archival solution, Amazon Glacier. And we have a content distribution network called Amazon CloudFront. And we have a number of database services. We have a relational database service that we call Amazon Relational Database Service, which comes in flavors of MySQL and Oracle and SQL Server. We have a very scalable, high throughput, non-relational database service called DynamoDB. And then we have a caching service and a data warehousing service. And then we have a number of application services that we have provided through the years. We have a search business, a search service that we launched a couple of years ago called Cloud Search. We have a number of messaging services. We have a queuing service called Simple Queue Service, a notification service called Simple Notification Service, a workflow service, an email service, a transcoding service for video. And then we have a number of management abstractions so that if you don't actually want to work with the APIs or the command level tools, command line tools, you don't have to. And so we have a website GUI that we call our management console, but we have monitoring called CloudWatch, and we have auto scaling that allows you to set automatic triggers and when you want to automatically scale up your servers or scale down your servers, and identity federation, and just a whole number of management tools that allow you to use our our platform and run your workloads in an easier to manage format. And then we have a number of people services that we've added to through the years. We have premium support, which is really a developer support service. We have a professional services team now that can help customers who want a little bit more hands-on help on how to move to the cloud and architect optimally. And then we also have training and certification for those that are actually learning AWS and want some both training and then recognition that they're experts on the platform. So very full functional, robust technology infrastructure platform we've built that is continuing to evolve quickly. I would say that outside of the security and operational performance of the platform over the last 7 years, the thing that the team is collectively most proud of is the pace of innovation and the pace of delivery. And you can see this is a list of significant services and features that we've launched through the years. In 2007, which was the second year we were in business, we launched 9 significant services and features. Last year in 2012, it was nearly 160. And if you look at this year alone, in the first 4 months of the year, it's 71 significant services and features. We're on pace to be over 200, and we're really not slowing down. We have a very broad global footprint at this point, and the way to think about the terminology in AWS of geographic dispersion is we have this construct called regions. And a region is a place somewhere in the world where we have multiple data centers, and we think of those data centers as availability zones. And so we have regions at this point on the East Coast of the United States, the West Coast of the United States, Europe, Singapore, Tokyo, Australia, Brazil, and then we have a government-only region in the US that we call GovCloud, which has ITAR compliance, because it turns out a lot of the largest government workloads require that only natural US citizens work on those. So we have 9 regions throughout the world, and then we have 25 availability zones in those regions, and then we have 38 points of presence or edge locations for our content distribution network. To give you a few points of scale for AWS at this point, we have hundreds of thousands of customers in over 190 countries. This is a chart of our storage service, Amazon Simple Storage Service, or S3, and you can see that we have over 2 trillion objects that we're storing in S3. It took us 6 years to accumulate the first trillion and just a year to accumulate the second trillion, so it's growing very quickly. And just to give you an idea of the technical scope of it, we pretty regularly peak at 1.1 million requests per second, so just very large scale in these services. This is our Elastic MapReduce service, which I mentioned earlier, our Hadoop implementation on top of EC2, which companies use for large analytics. And you can see in the last couple of years that we've had 5.5 million clusters launched on EMR. And then this is kind of an interesting statistic too, which is that every single day now in AWS, we're adding enough new servers to have handled all of Amazon globally back in 2003 when it was a $5.2 billion business with 7,800 employees. So just think about that. Every single day, like today, we're adding enough new servers to have handled all of Amazon globally when it was a $5 billion business with nearly 8,000 employees. We're adding a lot of data centers and a lot of servers every single day. As I mentioned, we have a large customer base. It's very diverse. It ranges from some of the most successful startups like Pinterest and Spotify and Instagram and Acquia and Dropbox to some of the largest enterprises like Shell and Netflix and Samsung and Schneider Electric and Adobe and Hitachi and Toshiba, to some of the largest public sector organizations. If you look at our government business today, we have over 500 government agencies worldwide using AWS and over 2,000 academic institutions using AWS. So a very broad and very diverse customer base. And we really, when we started building AWS in the early stages of it, when we were defining the products, and we spent quite a bit of time defining the products, we had many, many animated debates about where we should draw the line on V1. That's why I was very interested in Michael's discourse on that. And there were a lot of very good ideas and opinions about where we should draw those lines. And one of the debates we had most heatedly was how many of the decisions should we make for developers? How much should we build into the services? How much freedom should we give them? You know, oh, you can't leave this undecided, or developers will actually hurt themselves with these services. And after much debate, what we ultimately decided was that we were not going to be paternal, and that we wanted to actually provide low-level, highly flexible, very usable building blocks or primitive services. And we would allow our customers to then stitch those together however they saw fit and however worked best for their business. And because of that decision, it really allowed our customers to use us in every imaginable way. And it's why you see every imaginable workload on top of AWS. And that ranges from simple dev and test to all kinds of internal and external website applications to media distribution to high-performance computing and all kinds of analytics, to backup and archival and disaster recovery, to mission-critical financial systems and CRM systems. All of it is being run on top of AWS today, in large part because of the way that we built the services. You know, a question that we got asked over and over again in the very early days, and I would say that people were skeptical in the early days, and today it's still a very important issue, but people are a lot less skeptical, is about security. And if you're building an application that stores anything reasonably sensitive, you should care about security as a very top priority. And what we told people, and what's true, is that we use many of the same security practices as has been used over the last 30 years. So we have very strict access control to our physical data centers. We are very careful to make sure that no packets are being intercepted on our network. We wipe our hardware clean once people give up resources on our hardware, so nothing is left over. But we've also added quite a few security features over the last number of years to further address customers who've asked us to add these features so it's easier for them to adopt AWS. And you know, those range, it's a pretty broad range of features here. I won't go through them all, but they range from having private connections between customers' own data centers when they've got that asset already straight into AWS, to having the ability to run as the only instance or instance on top of a single server if they want to be the only ones on there, to having identity and access management so that you had unique permissions for different users in your company. It's a pretty broad group of features that we continue to add. And then we also heard early on that there were a number of companies who said, okay, I get it, I understand why it's secure, I get the value of AWS, but there are these certifications that we're used to having across all of our suppliers or for our internal environment that we need you to add. So again, metronomically over the last 7 years, we've added all these certifications like SOC 1 and SOC 2 and ISO 27001 and PCI and HIPAA and the Motion Picture Association of America, so that the film companies can store their sensitive assets in AWS, and FSMA low and FSMA moderate and ITAR and DICAP and FIPS. I knew none of these things before I started working on AWS, but they are very important to our customers. And at the end of the day, the vast majority of our roadmap is dictated by what our customers tell us are important, and this was important to them. We have a pretty simple and consistent pricing philosophy, and this is true in AWS. It's also true across all of Amazon and the businesses that we're in. And I would say that it's a pretty different philosophy from most of the players in the technology infrastructure space over the last 30 years. I would say that a lot of the old guard technology companies' pricing strategy is roughly charge as much as you can. And that is, by the way, a very reasonable business strategy. It's a high margin business strategy, and it's worked very successfully for those companies over the years. It just happens not to be our strategy. We passionately believe that this business, if most of computing is moving to the cloud, which we believe over the next 10 to 20 years, that this is going to be a high volume, low margin business. And so we work very hard and relentlessly across our business to try to take cost out so that we can pass that back to customers in the form of lower prices. And so it's why we've reduced prices on 31 different occasions in the last few years, really with no competitive pressure to do so. And it also has led to this really interesting and helpful for customers and also for our business virtuous cycle here, which is that as we have more customers using AWS, it leads to more AWS usage. With more AWS usage, we have to buy more infrastructure. As we buy more infrastructure, we get economies of scale, and it lowers our infrastructure costs. And then as we lower our infrastructure costs, we're able to reduce prices again for customers, and it sends that wheel spinning. And what we found out is that there are ways to inject additional energy into that virtuous cycle. So if you have a large ecosystem where those companies are helping other companies get on top of AWS or run their software on AWS, if you have a broad global footprint, if you add a lot of features and services, it drives more customers and more AWS usage and spins that wheel. And similarly, if you continue to innovate on the infrastructure side, which we have a very large focus on, that lowers your infrastructure costs, which again allows you to reduce prices and spins that wheel. So it's very useful for customers and it's very useful for our business. And we are so obsessed with trying to help customers and try and help them save money that we build features like Trusted Advisor, which you see up here. And what Trusted Advisor is, it's part of our AWS support service. And we have a number of automated checks that we've built through time. There's roughly 300 checks where we look at things for our customers like what their security setup is and whether they have ports open that maybe they shouldn't have open. Or we look at what their architecture looks like with regard to are they in multiple availability zones for fault tolerance. And we also look at a number of dimensions on cost. So we look at how many instances they have, how highly utilized are those instances, how many are idle, how many do they run largely at steady state, but they're actually paying on-demand prices rather than reserved instances where you pay a small amount up front and then save about half on your per hour costs. And we proactively reach out and try and tell customers how they can save money. Now, I'd ask you how many technology companies call their customers and say spend less money. Not that many. But we have sent out in the short time that we've had the program several 100,000 of these alerts. And we've saved people on an annualized basis tens of millions of dollars. And it's again because we know that customers care about paying lower costs and we want to help them. We don't want to earn money because there's breakage or because they bought something and they're not using it. If they're not getting value out of it, we don't want them to pay for it because we're not trying to build a relationship that's optimized for 1 quarter or 1 year. We're trying to build a long-term relationship that outlasts all of us. So that's how we think about it. We have a very vibrant ecosystem. It's grown quite a bit over the last number of years and grows at a very fast clip. And we think about this ecosystem in a couple dimensions. We have systems integrators, or SIs, and we have thousands of these now, and they range from some of the largest ones like Capgemini and Deloitte and Cognizant, Infosys, and Booz Allen to thousands of regional and local ones who are actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting as the larger SIs have taken some time to get going. And then we have a number of ISVs who've built their products on top of AWS, and that has been a very, very fast growing segment for us. We want our customers to be able to run whatever software they're used to being able to run on top of our infrastructure. And so again, it's a big group of people. It ranges from SAP and Oracle and Adobe to Acquia, MongoDB. It's a very broad group. And then we've recently, about a year ago, launched the AWS Marketplace. And what this is a place where customers can find third-party software solutions that are built on top of AWS. And we have about 25 product categories at this point, almost 800 product listings, and it's growing really quickly. The number of active customers has doubled since just the beginning of this year, and then the usage per customer is up 53%. And again, growing really quickly. It's a great way for ISVs to further get distribution and monetize their products. So I thought I would give you our take of why people have moved so quickly to adopt cloud computing. And there is quite a bit of noise about this topic in the market, and I think that there will continue to be a lot of noise about this topic. And I think that there are a number of companies who will try to twist this a little bit to try and serve whatever is useful for their own business. But I figured since we've been at it the longest and we've been doing it for 7 years, I'd at least give you our take on it. And this take has remained pretty constant. There's one or two things that we've seen evolve through time, but we hear a lot of the same value over and over from people. And the first thing is that as a business, if you can trade capital expense for variable expense, it's a big advantage. To not have to lay out all that capital up front for data centers and servers before you know what's going to be successful and how successful is really useful. And then, not only do you get to trade CapEx for variable expense, but then that variable expense is lower through AWS than the vast majority of companies can do on their own. And that's because AWS has so much scale at this point, given how large we are, that we're able to pass on that scale in the form of lower prices to our customers. And there's a number, there's a number of examples here. You can see Foursquare saved 50% on their analytics costs, or Samsung saved nearly $35 million on their Smart Hub app, and the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, they've just deployed about a dozen apps at this point and has saved tens of millions of dollars, and they're moving hundreds of those apps over the next couple of years. But there's also an IDC study that was done last year that shows if you look even over a 5-year period of time, there's a 70% lower cost of TCO on AWS than when companies do it themselves on-prem. So you get to trade capital expense for variable expense, a lower variable expense than you can do on your own. And then the third thing is you don't have to guess anymore on what your capacity needs are going to be. And for anybody that's built products, you know what I'm talking about here. You can look at this green dotted line on this chart on the left, and that's very often an example of what your predicted capacity needs will be. And that solid white line is an illustration of what actual demand can be sometimes. And so what you can see on the left side of that graph, you actually have a lot of excess capital that you're sitting on, and you're wasting a lot of money, a scarce resource. And then on the right side of that graph, it turns out your application gets going and you get real demand, and then you're short the capacity you need. And what happened in the old model was that you would run around like a chicken with your head cut off to try and find that extra capacity. Some people actually decided they weren't going to find that extra capacity, and then you provided a very bad customer experience. But most wanted to provide a good customer experience, and so they worked really hard to go find that capacity. They'd often overpay for it. They would sign up for 2 or 3 years of commitment. They'd have to sit on that even if they didn't sustain that peak, and it was very wasteful. In the new model, you don't have to guess anymore. You pick whatever you are going to consume. If it turns out you need more, you seamlessly scale up. If it turns out that you hit a peak and you don't need that capacity anymore, you just give it back and you stop paying for it. It's elastic. And so paying for what you consume is a really different business model and provides much more flexibility for customers. The fourth thing, and increasingly for larger companies, this ends up often being the most important thing to them, is that you don't have to spend so much time and take so long to get anything done. So when we were starting AWS, we went to a number of companies, and we went also to a number of development teams inside Amazon. And we said, how long does it take you to get a server if you want to test something or put something in Integ or do something new? And the answers we got ranged from 6 to 28 weeks. That's just maddening. Like, we were blown away. We didn't even realize that ourselves. And what happens is you end up with development teams that just stop trying to do new things because it's just too frustrating and demoralizing, and it's going to take so long to get that server, even if you can get it through. And anybody that does a lot of innovation will tell you that the two most important parts of innovation are, number one, you have to try a lot of experiments, and number two, if those experiments don't work out, and many of them should not work out if you're really pushing the envelope, that you don't have to live with the collateral damage of failed experiments. And the cloud is a really different model. You actually can spin up hundreds or thousands of instances or servers in minutes on your own in a completely self-service fashion. And then, if it turns out that your experiments are unsuccessful, you either give them back to us and stop paying for them, or you just repurpose them for new experiments. That is a really different model than has existed in the old world. And again, lots of examples. You can see News International was able to reduce their application deployment times from 2 months to 3 days. Lionsgate went from weeks to hours, and the IDC study showed that it's 5 times more quickly to deploy on AWS than it is on-prem. And it's just, again, it's a different model. In a world where there's a lot of competition, and in a world where it's easier than ever for startups to get going and building businesses, and then the spaces get crowded, you have to actually be iterating quickly, or you will end up losing customers and with much smaller market segment share. And so you want to be able to be agile. The fifth thing is, at most companies, the scarce resource are software development engineers. And almost every engineering team has this long list of projects they want to do and that teams want them to do. And then they go through this long and painful and frustrating process of triaging and making or choices. Which ones are we going to do? We used to do this at Amazon all the time, and it was really a frustrating experience. And so if you can take that scarce resource, who are your software development engineers, and instead of having them spend time on managing the infrastructure, which is important, but it hardly ever differentiates your business. If instead you can have those software development engineers focused on things that really differentiate your value proposition or your business, that's a huge advantage. Now you have to have somebody who's reliable and scalable and cost effective to give that infrastructure to, but fortunately that exists now, and it allows companies to take their scarce resource and just focus them on what differentiates their business. And the last thing that we hear frequently is that companies of all sizes have global end users. Startups, you guys know this. From day one, in a lot of cases, you have global end users because of the diminishing borders that the internet provides. And so in the old days, if you wanted to actually provide a better customer experience for your end users in different countries, you would have to think about trying to find a co-location facility in another country, and who would they be, and can I trust them, and this cost seems much more expensive than the US, and are they reliable? And then it was a very long process on top of that. Today, with AWS, with our global footprint, you can deploy globally in minutes or days as opposed to months. And there's a good example of this just recently. Qantas Airlines, which is a big airline in Australia, they've built a booking business, a hotel booking business to go with their airline business. And it's called Huru. And they deployed to a second region. They were in one region, they wanted to deploy to a second region, and it took them 2 people in 2 days. That exercise in the old days, they said, would have taken them 6 months and many people. So again, just changes what you can do. So in summary, the reasons we hear people moving to the cloud, you get to trade CapEx for variable expense. That variable expense is lower than what you can do on your own. It provides you elasticity, so you only pay for what you consume. It lets you move much more quickly. It lets you use your scarce resources of engineers on things that differentiate your business, and then you can go global and provide that customer experience in minutes or days as opposed to months. So I thought I would close just by giving you some things to think about as you're thinking over time about how to think about a cloud partner. And these are the things that I would tell you to think about. The first thing is, it's pretty hard to run at the scale that AWS is running at this time. When we started this business 7 years ago, we started in significant part because we thought we were pretty good at managing deep infrastructure services in the stack, things like compute and storage and database and messaging, and in running reliable, scalable, cost-effective data centers, because we had to get good at it to scale Amazon, the retailer, the first 10 years of our business. And I can tell you that 7 years later, with every imaginable use case and hundreds of thousands of customers across the 190 countries, and people using you without really ever warning that they're going to use you in the ways they're using you, we are much, much better at this today than 7 years ago. And we thought we were pretty good 7 years ago. And one of the things I'd say, which an expression we use a lot internally, is that there just is no compression algorithm for experience. You can't get that experience of a lot of the things you have to deal with at various elbows of the curve unless you're actually going through it and live through it, and you see where things aren't working the way you intended. So the first thing I would look at when you're thinking about a partner is who's done it for a while, and do they have experience scaling and growing and running very large infrastructure services. Second thing I would tell you is that you're going to want a platform, given the way the world has evolved, that has a lot of functionality and is very robust. You're not going to want to work on top of a platform that feels like what the standard was 3 or 4 years ago. The world is changing really quickly, and if you look at the amount of functionality on AWS, it's really much broader than anything else that's out there. And if you couple that with the fact that AWS continues to innovate at a very fast pace, it's compelling. And I would tell you that it's pretty much motherhood and apple pie for companies to tell you that we're going to listen to our customers and then we're going to iterate quickly on their behalf. But in practice, it's hard. It really is hard. You have to be organized in a way that allows you to deliver quickly. You have to build in such a way where there aren't so many dependencies that you actually can release quickly. And I think if you look in practice at the pace of innovation and delivery of AWS versus most of the technology companies over the last 7 years, at least in our general space, it's pretty different. I'd say the fourth thing is you're going to want to provide a good customer experience across various places in the world. If you've got global customers. If you don't have global customers, it's not as important. But again, I think most companies now find themselves with global customers, and so having a very broad geographic footprint matters. I think the pricing philosophy of the company you're going to partner with also matters. I would say there's a handful of companies that we've encountered over the years who've told us, well, cost matters, but we're not really price sensitive. And that's an unusual response that we get, and I often, it raises an eyebrow just because I think every company should care about how much they're spending on their costs because the world changes and dynamics change and the economy changes. But even those companies that say they don't care very much about cost will care about cost, and many of them actually have, through the years changed that stance. And I think that you're going to want to work with a company that is committed to figuring out how they can afford to lower prices for you. For AWS, this is not a gimmick. It's not something we do for optics. It's not something we're trying to do to get attention in the press. This is who we are, and this is our DNA, and this is the way we function. And so I've worked on every business at Amazon. I've been at Amazon for 16 years now, and I've worked on every business that we've been in. And the culture inside Amazon and for every business is that we start with the customer, and then all the strategy and tactics evolve backwards from there. And I've just never encountered a customer in any of these businesses who for any sustained period of time wanted to pay more. And so if you have that perspective, then you work really hard to figure out how to take cost out of your own cost structure so that you can give it back to customers in the form of lower prices. And I also, if you noticed earlier, I said that we work really hard to be able to afford to lower prices. Anyone can lower prices. I mean, and companies do it from time to time when they can't really afford it. But it's actually not that useful for customers if companies aren't committed to really trying to figure out how to proactively lower their prices to customers. So we don't just lower prices, we work really hard to be able to afford to lower prices for our customers. And that's a way of life for us and something you'll continue to see. And then the last thing is, whenever you're making a big shift, and what's happening in the cloud is a pretty titanic shift in my opinion, you want to, as you're moving there, you want to try and move there with a really vibrant ecosystem because it makes everything easier. If you're a company that needs help in architecting your applications to work well on the cloud, you want a large systems integrator ecosystem. If you are used to running software that you want to work really well on top of AWS or on top of a cloud platform, you want a vibrant ISV ecosystem that works on top of a cloud platform. If you're in an industry where either the rest of your competitors or your end users are a little bit skittish about moving to the cloud because it's new for them, it's very useful if there are other companies who are operating on that cloud platform, and if you actually have other companies near you who you can talk to and share best practices and get advice. Or, a lot of people, it's pretty amazing how many job descriptions now for developers have AWS skills as one of the requirements. So just having a really vibrant ecosystem of partners and customers that are using the platform makes it much easier to think about moving forward yourself and growing, and makes it more attractive to build long-term on top of that platform. So with that, I'm going to thank you guys for being here. It's really fun to be in Boston with you and here at the iLab, and I'll turn it back over to Michael for the conversation.